I want to start by wishing everybody a Gmar Hatima Tova. I hope that all your prayers and everything that you wish for yourself and for your family and for your loved ones, it comes true, it comes to fruition, and we are zochet to experience a magnificent year, a year of beautiful growth, of sanity, of health, of wealth, of stability, of safety, all these things that we used to take for granted. I think in this year we know that we actually have to ask for them. You know, I kind of feel like when I'm coming into Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur this year, it's a very different feeling than maybe I've ever felt in my whole life. I don't know if you agree with me. I'm not sure if you people maybe give us some likes so I can see from here if you're agreeing with me on this. My tefillah, my prayer on Rosh Hashanah was completely different this year. Usually you're saying Sefer Chaim, you're like bracha, shalom, right? You're thinking about all the other things. But it's rare that you're focusing on Chaim. Did anyone else have that? I mean, it's like random people are just passing away. It's like people with underlying conditions, not underlying conditions. It's crazy. So suddenly, there's nothing that we take for granted. It's a radically different prayer. You know what it feels like? It feels like the first time you take a flight with a budget airline. I don't know if you remember this. There was a time when there was a budget airline called Ryanair, and they were contemplating, actually, they were thinking about charging you to go to the bathroom. It's amazing. Did you hear that, right? So you ask for peanuts, it costs money. You ask for water, it costs money. You know, you want to move to that seat, it costs money. Everything costs money. That's how they get you. It costs money for your suitcase, it costs money for everything you want to do on the plane costs money. There's nothing that's included. So what happens? After a while, everything costs money. You know, they tell you, ladies and gentlemen, we've arrived at our destination. Step this way to get off the plane. I was tempted to ask if disembarking costs extra. Or is there a fee? Or how does that work? Are you allowed to actually wear clothing? Or is that all counted as extra weight? All these things suddenly, once you stop taking all these things for granted, you realize that everything's up for grabs. And that's really how this Yamim Noraim has felt. And it's really given my prayers an extra, I feel like my prayers are on Red Bull. They've got wings this year. It's a strange thing. So I want to, if I can, together with you with the time that we have tonight, to try to zone in on one element of Yom Kippur. It shares this a little bit with Rosh Hashanah, but I want to kind of build on something that Rabbi Reuven was talking about. You know, in our prayers, it mentions this idea. The idea, it says in the Tefillah, is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us, and you gave us, this Yom HaKippurim be'ahava. Right? One of the best lines that was ever said by any person ever was a line that was said by a fish in a film called Finding Nemo. I don't know if you guys have seen this line, but they're these fish, right? And they have to go into the anemones, whatever that little thing, spiky thing. Someone can type exactly what it is. I don't remember. And he says, "With friends like these, who needs anemones?" Right? That amazing line. Such a classic dad joke. Like, if dad jokes had dads, that's the joke that a dad joke's dad would say. Amazing. And I kind of feel like Hashem, Hashem's like, here's a gift I'm going to give you. I give you this gift with love. Just there's no eating. And also, no intimacy. And also, those shoes, gotta go. We need you to be wearing Crocs with socks, if that's okay. Crocs with socks is the name of the day. That's Hashem. That's the day you give me with love. I have to smell like body odor. That's Hashem. That's the day of love. What is happening that this day is a day of love? And the recalibration in our minds of this day being a punishment, an atonement to being a day where we are so lucky to have is one of the first steps towards getting into the zone. You walk into Yom Kippur completely different. Tell me if this is true. You walk into shul, every one of us is the same. You open the door, everyone's quiet. It's the only time that shul has people in it and isn't quiet. And isn't lots of people talking. You walk in, it's Kal Nidre, you walk in, everyone's like, right? It's amazing. No one can even hear each other. There's this heavy sense, but actually, it's the most beautiful day ever. You know, there used to be a program that the government ran, and actually I didn't think I would hear about it again until recently. It came on the news, where the government and the police were offering something called a day of amnesty. What would that mean? Let's say you had a gun, you had a gun illegally. You had a knife in England illegally, okay? You were able to turn in the gun and turn in the knife, and no one would arrest you. There's not bringing charges against you. They're not doing it. Do you guys remember that? You turn in the gun, no problem. What a special chesed that is. Either you could get caught and go to jail, or if you turn up, hand in the gun, no questions asked, no problem, go back to your home. What an unbelievable opportunity that is. Yom Kippur is a day of amnesty. Hashem says, I want you to do one thing. I want you to turn up to the synagogue. I want you to do something which is exactly the opposite of the way things work in our world. We say in the Tefillah, Hashem, you are different than everything, every court system in the land. In the court systems here on earth, if you admit that you did something wrong, everything you say can and will be held against you in a court of law. That's what every policeman says when they, hopefully not leaning on your neck, right? But hopefully arresting you in an orderly fashion, not killing you like with George Floyd Bar Minan, right? But if they arrest you, they have to say that. You have the right to remain silent. You have the right to a lawyer. Anything you say can and will be held against you in a court of law. Says the Tefillah, Hashem, but you're not like Basar Vadam. With you it says, Modeh ve'ozev Yeruham. If you admit and you let go, you admit your sin and you let go, Yeruham, Hashem says, I will give you mercy. I will bless you in the things that you want. I will clean you. Isn't that beautiful? We can come in here and whisper in God's ears all the things that we did. No one else needs to know. Gazal. Modeh ve'ozev. I promise I won't do it again. Yerucham, you get off the hook. What you say can and will be held against you, not against you, but in your favor in the heavenly court. So number one, let's rephrase, recalibrate. Yom Kippur is a day of unbelievable joy. It's a day of unbelievable celebration. It's a day of unbelievable closeness to Hashem. And I want to show you a couple of examples of this idea to reinforce that feeling, because it feels completely different. If you're a child and you've done something wrong and your father says, David, Rivka, you know when the parents yell the kid's name because they're in trouble and all of a sudden they whip out the middle name, you know that? They're like, Shlomo Bartholomew Farhi, you get yourself down here right now. I think that's the only reason why parents give their children middle names, is that when they get angry, they can shout all of the names and it seems much more impressive. Shlomo Bartholomew. No, that's not before you ask. That's not my middle name, I don't have it. Okay? Although that is what someone who had a middle name like Bartholomew would say, so you probably won't believe me. Either way, I want to share with you, when God says, come here! What did you do? Where did you go? What did you say? How did you do that? What did you think? What were you feeling? Hashem says it be'ahava. And I want you to point this out again and again in the liturgy. Listen what it says. The Arizal asks a question. When we come on the night of Yom Kippur and we walk into the Beit HaKnesset, one of the first things we do is we put the talet on. And even though we put the talet on, it's the only time we're wearing the talet at night. But you put it on before nightfall, and you don't make a beracha. The Arizal says, let me tell you why you don't make a beracha. That's what he says. Why don't you make a beracha on the talet? He says there's an interesting halakha. The halakha is that you make a beracha on a talet only if it belongs to you. If someone lends you a talet, or if the synagogue has taletot for the whole community, it's there for you. So therefore, when you're using it, it's as if it's yours. But let's say I use a talet that belongs to somebody else, and they're not giving it to me. They tell me straight out, I'm not giving you talet, you could use it for 2 seconds, but it's not yours at all. The halacha would be on a talit that's borrowed, you don't make a beracha. Says the Arizal, the talit that we wear on the night of Kippur, when we stand there in Kal Nidre, it's not ours. It's a talit that is borrowed from God. And God wraps us in this talit. This idea that suddenly we are completely ensconced in something which is all white, at least if you're Sephardic. Mostly white if you're Ashkenazi, a couple black lines, but either way, it's a beautiful symbology for what it is that's about to happen. God wraps you in your talit. You're using God's talit. Now the question is, where did the Arizal get this from? Where do we find this idea that Hashem suddenly owns all the talits in the world, and you're borrowing his talit, and that's why you don't make? Where do we get that from? So I want to share with you what I think where the Arizal is drawing this idea from. Torah tells us that when Moshe went up to Shamayim, when Moshe went up to heaven, and he asked God to forgive the Jewish people for the worst sin that we ever did, the sin of the golden calf, of the Parah Adumah. God said to Moshe, listen, I want to show you something. Says the Gemara, Min Lamed, it comes to teach us. Shehit Atef, HaKadosh Baruch Hu wrapped himself, so to speak, in a talit, like a shaliach tzibur, like a chazan, in front of Moshe. And he recited in front of Moshe Rabbeinu, Amonai, Amonai, Kerachum Mechanun, Erech Apayim, V'rav Chesed Ve'emet, Notze Chesed La'alafim, Nose Avon, V'fesha V'chata, V'nakeh. He reads to Moshe the 13 attributes of mercy. And then he says to Moshe, I want to tell you from now until forever, whenever my children are in trouble, whenever my children have sinned and strayed from the path, whenever my children have done the averot that gets them in hot water, and how does an avon get us in hot water? You know what averot are like? Borei Olam is constantly pouring beracha on us. Shefa, he's bringing all the beauty, all the para, he's pouring it on us. You know what an avera is? An avera takes the pipe that's going snorkel directly from my mouth, breathing tube, to God, and it starts filling it like a heart that has cholesterol with blockages. You put one avon, still gets through. Couple avon or more, harder to get through. Eventually it's just a trickle. At some stage, when there's so much cholesterol clogging the arteries of the heart can't get any blood. When there's so many averot that are clogging the pipes, eventually what happens is the beracha that is flowing from God unequivocally, without any stop. Hashem is always blessing us. He's always trying to give, but sometimes we shut it off from ourselves. God says if ever they are in such a situation, teach them this, to wrap themselves in a talit, and to say these 13 midot, these attributes of mercy in front of me. And I swear, says God, she'enam chozrim rekam, that they will not leave empty-handed. I will fulfill their request and I will forgive them. That talit that you're wearing as you come to God to recite Kel Rachum V'Chanun again and again and again, all through the night, Shacharit, Musaf, Mincha, Neila, again and again and again. Whose talit is that? You have no right to wear that talit. You haven't earned it. I haven't earned it. We own nothing. We deserve nothing. We would have to give everything just for the gift of life that God gives us, and we would still have run out of credit. And yet Borei Olam says, I swear, I promise, do this, and I got you. That talit is not ours. We wear it by the grace and by the compassion of HaKadosh Baruch Hu himself. So my friends, listen to the words we say in the lead up to those 13 attributes of mercy, exactly the Gemara I just mentioned to you. El horeta lanu lomar midot 13. God, horeta lanu, you taught us to say. I want you to imagine a man who walks into court. All the evidence is stacked against him. The jury is nodding as the prosecutor is making his closing arguments. The defense attorney realizes the guy's toast. Hada's going to Rikers Island. Chalas. They're not going to see him anymore. They're going to lock him up for 150 years. All of a sudden, the guy's shaking. He's crying. They're ready to announce the verdict. Trembling. You know, I remember a little while ago, we had a group of students. We were teaching them on the next program in London. And in this program, we expose kids to different disciplines and different jobs all around the spectrum of employment so that they would be able to see great people doing unbelievable things in their field, and that would widen their perspectives of what they could do with their lives. And one of the things was, we took them to see a dear friend of mine. His father is one of the highest judges in England. His name is Judge Ziedman, and they took him to see a court. And the kids happened to walk in the day and in the moment when they were sentencing a young man. And at that moment, the verdict came down. And he was going to be spending his life, a young man, his entire lifetime in prison with no possibility of parole. One of the teachers said to me, you know, I had an angle. I was able to see his face. I was watching when they read the guilty verdict. And when he heard how many years he was going to spend behind bars, that's it. He was never getting out. He's 19 years old. He committed an act of murder, an aggravated assault, all different sorts of things that he did. Khalas, his life was over. She says, I watched a human being crumble. He realized in that moment, this is it. There is no more freedom. I'm locked away forever. My life is going to be a box with bars on it like a rat in a cage. Think about that. We are standing before the most important verdict of our lives. And this year, more than most, we understand that everything is up for grabs. Not just a raise or not a raise. It's not just a nicer shidduch or a less nice shidduch. It's, are you going to be here in 2021? Are we selling you a seat in the synagogue because you joined the ranks of people who went the way of the ventilator? Crazy. We should be like that person, trembling. Because although God calls us here with love, everything is in the balance if we don't get it right. And what do we say? El horeta lanu lomar. I want you to imagine if in that courthouse, in that moment, right as they're about to read out the verdict, they've said guilty, and then they turn from jury to judge to wait for the actual sentencing. And the judge says, bangs his gavel, will the defendant please approach the bench? The defendant is still shaking. He slowly makes his way up to the bench, and he looks up with puppy dog eyes at the judge, and the judge says, if you just say that the reason why you killed them was because of a crime of passion, if you just tell them that you were on the medication, I read your file, it says that you were on this medication, there has been known to be some side effects. Also, if you just say, could you imagine what would happen if the prosecution heard the judge telling the man what to say in order to get off the hook? He'd never be a judge again. But Borei Olam sits in his chair, Al Kisei Din, on the seat of judgment. And as the hammer's about to fall, we know we're guilty. He says, Rohi, come here. Repeat after me. Amonai, Amonai. I swear to you, you will not go back empty-handed. That's what it means that God gave us this day with love. It's terrifying, but it is also, it's something that should bring us to tears. You know, there's a fascinating question that I asked on Rosh Hashanah in the downstairs minyan. We know that on Rosh Hashanah, from the Torah, a person has to blow tikiyah, teruah, tikiyah. We just don't know what a teruah is. It might be shivarim teruah, it might be shivarim, it might be teruah. So we have to blow 30 kolot because we're blowing 10 of each, because it might be this one, 10 might be the second one, 10 might be the third one. So really, even with all of the doubts, how many do we need? 30, right? 30 kolot. How many do we blow on Rosh Hashanah? 100. 101 actually, the last one. Why do we blow 101 kolot? The Gemara tells us that we learn this idea, this 101 kolot, where do we learn it from? From Sisera's mother. Who's Sisera? Sisera was a general, a wicked general, but a general that was unbelievable at what he did. He was remarkably talented. He won every war he ever went out to, never lost. He tortured, he raped, he murdered, he plundered, everything. He pillaged, okay? And then he fights the Jews. And then he fights Devorah, and then he fights Barak. Barak ben Avinoam. And they defeat Sisera. And Sisera's mother is waiting at home. And she starts doing this thing that the Gemara talks about. It's called Yilala. The Pasuk says, Batiyalel im Sisera. And she starts wailing. And how many times does Sisera's mother wail? 100 times. So therefore, on Rosh Hashanah, we wail 101 times. One more than Sisera's mother. What? What does that have to do? What does Hitler's mom have to do with the Tikkiot on Rosh Hashanah? The answer, my friends, is what we take with us when we walk into synagogue on Sunday night. Is a man who takes his family to the Kinneret to go swimming. And he knows how dangerous the waters can be. So he does what every responsible parent does. He creates a buddy system. You know, the oldest kid, David, you have to look out for Shimon. This one, Abraham, you need to look out for Simcha. This one, you have Nachum, you're together with this one, with Shalom, okay? Everyone go, have a good time, make sure you're looking out for your brother. They're there, they're having a great time, splashing around. It's 7 p.m. at night, and all the kids start coming in. The father says, it's getting late, the sun's going down, let's go home. Everyone comes, except Nachum. The father looks around, he can't see his son anywhere. I don't know if any of you has ever had one of those moments. I remember once when I crossed the street to go to a pizza shop in London, and all of a sudden, one of my daughters wasn't there. None of the kids had her. My wife thought I was taking her. I thought she was taking her. And in that moment, when I turned back to the street where none of us had her, and I started screaming her name, got down on my hands and feet, lying down on the asphalt, looking underneath the cars so that I could see into the street if, God forbid, she'd been run over and was lying lifeless in the street. I was screaming. I couldn't breathe. I felt like the walls of my chest, my rib cage had just collapsed in on itself. Screaming. It turned out she'd wandered down the street and some wonderful young person came and brought her back. But this man, he's got this terror. And he's screaming, "Nahum!" Running up the beach, down the beach, back to the car to see if he walked back by himself. Nahum! Nothing. To the water. Nahum! Finally, he calls the kid over, who was supposed to be the buddy. He said, "Shalom, where's Nahum? He was supposed to watch after him." He says, "I was." He was swimming in the water, and then he decided he wanted to go leave, so he took his little tube, and he started, running towards. I waited. I watched him all the way until he got to the edge, right by the beach. And then I thought he was on the beach. He was fine. But I saw him walk out of the water. Father knew now is no time to start arguing or yelling at his kid or making him feel guilty. He calls the police, the Coast Guard. Within minutes, this quiet beach is covered with sirens and the sound of the helicopters and the Coast Guard boat zipping back and forth. And they're looking for this boy, and an hour goes by, and the mother comes, and father and mother are sitting at the beach at the edge of the water, bawling their eyes out. Two hours, 3 hours, 4 hours. By now, it's already 11 o'clock at night. The police officer comes to this man and he says, I think you need to start preparing for the worst. The likelihood that your son is alive after we cannot find him for 4 or 5 hours at night, that likelihood is getting slimmer and slimmer. If there's any phone calls you need to make, you probably should start making them now. No, go look, please look further. I'll pay extra if I need to. Sir, it's not about the money. Our teams are still looking. They're going to expand the search. Normally they expand the search. They go to 3 miles in every diameter. We now have them going to 4 miles and 5 miles in diameter. They're searching and combing each drop of the ocean. But you can imagine in the night with searchlights looking for one little boy in this, it's very, very difficult. Man is crying. He's praying. 7 hours, 8 hours, 9 hours, 10 hours. Rabotai, it was 8 a.m. in the morning when this distraught and devastated father and mother suddenly realized that their phone was ringing. And they were not aware. I mean, you could imagine how dialed in they are. They were not aware. They couldn't realize that someone was calling. But he checks again, and it's a missed call. Dials a number back. Who is this? Sir, this is the head of the Coast Guard. Hayeled nimtza. Could you imagine? Could you imagine those words? Hayeled nimtza. They're screaming, they're jumping, they're dancing, they're calling everybody, telling everyone the great news, and they're waiting, and finally they bring this boy back, wrapped in a blanket, shivering. They bring him in, and this little 7-year-old boy, who's been in the water from 7 p.m. until 8 a.m. And the mother runs up and she throws her arms around them. And the father throws his arms around both of them and they cry on each other's shoulders. And the father says, Nachum, tell me, how did you stay holding onto the tube? It's a little tube. It's not even big enough to go around your waist. How did you hold onto the tube from 7 p.m. for over 12 hours? How did you not let go? Nachum composes himself, he dries his tears, and he says, Daddy, I wanted to let go a few times, but I kept holding on. I kept hoping that they would find me, that they were looking for me. And when I finally was just about to give up and to let go, I saw off in the distance there were searchlights. And I could hear the sound of the helicopters. And Abba, I knew you were looking for me. So I held on, because I knew my Abba was looking for me. We are drowning, my friends. We are drowning in issues of health. I don't know anyone who's not afraid. They might be afraid of different things. They might be afraid for the education of their children. They might be afraid for safety, for parnasah. They might be afraid of a virus. They might be afraid of schools closing down. They might be afraid of a lot of things, of losing their job because they can't afford childcare. There's 1,000,001 things that people might be afraid over. But the one thing that gives us comfort and that gives us hope is when we can hear the sound of the choppers flying, when we can hear the sound and see the sights of the searchlights sweeping the water in back and forth, swaths of water being scanned by someone who cares about me and has not given up hope. You know why we talk about Sisera and we mention her? We bring up the idea of Sisera's mother because her son was a Rasha. Her son was a wicked man. But a parent doesn't ever see their child as wicked. A parent sees their child as one to be loved, as one to be hugged, as one that you hope against hope that you know is going to make it in the end, and because you know it, they know it. He gave this day to us b'ahava. Hashem says you're going into battle, you're going into court. Take my talit. You're going to need this. Say this when you get to the courthouse. It will work, I promise. Don't you understand? So if Sister Ra's mother cries 100 times, if Sister Ra's mom cries that many times, so the shofar cries as well, so that the Jew should know that God is standing by the window. Madua icher lavo, why is he not yet here? How come he's not yet come? How come he's not yet come? How much longer do I need to wait? I'm not going to bed. I'm waiting up for him all night. You guys remember that when you were teenagers? When you got back at 2 or 3 in the morning and your mom or your dad is sitting there on the couch. You're like, Mom, what are you doing? They were like, I was nervous. I couldn't wait. Yeah, I couldn't wait to let you go. I couldn't go to sleep until you were home. Like, Mom, I'm 21 years old. Doesn't matter how old you are. Doesn't matter how far you've strayed. Doesn't matter how bad you've been. He's our Father. And he sits crying, waiting for our phone call. Umodeh ve'ozev yerucham. So when we come on this day, we only have to come with our heart in our hands and to say to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, we're here. We're here with you. You know, I want to end with this. The Torah tells us that Yosef was sold by his brothers. He goes all the way down to Egypt. And I always found this so interesting, so powerful. So powerful. His father thinks he's dead, right? The only people in the world who know he's alive are the people who try to get rid of him. His brothers, right? Could you imagine being that person? All alone. No one who cares about you knows you're alive. You're a slave in the house of Potiphar. Nobody wants you. Nobody cares about you. And all of a sudden, this woman comes along and she starts showing an interest in him. Do you know how intoxicating that interest was? Someone loves me. Someone thinks I'm valuable, I'm worthwhile. Says the Pasuk, and she kept saying it to him day after day. And the Pasuk says, and it was on the day when there was no man left in the house. Ish en babayit. Our rabbis tell us it was a day that all of the men left. They all went to go pray to the Avodah Zarah. But another explanation given by our rabbis is, Ish en babayit, there was no man left in Yosef. There was nothing left. He couldn't fight anymore. Someone loves me. Someone wants me. He's about to succumb. He's about to give in to his temptation. He's about to lose it all. And suddenly he sees the image of his father. And this always bothered me. But all of a sudden now he's seeing the image of his father. What does that mean? Now, Ra'ad demut yukno shel aviv. He saw the image of his father. What is he, an image of his father? What do you have, like Gedolim pictures? And now for the first time he's recalling his father in HD? Right? Is that what's happening here? Pulled him up on YouTube? The answer, my friends, is something that I think I think about every Yom Kippur. He didn't see his father's face in a picture in a frame. We know that when Yosef was born, it calls him Ki Ben Zikunim. Rashi tells us, quotes, he says that Yosef, of all of the sons, looked exactly like his father. His face was the face of his father. You know who Yosef saw? He saw in a pane of glass, in a mirror, he saw his face, but he saw in his face, he saw his father's face. He was looking at himself. And how was he looking at himself? With this woman grabbing onto his clothes, literally grabbing onto his jacket. And he saw himself in the throes of almost about to do avon, to do the worst sin. And yet, when he looked in his face, in his own face, he could still see the face of Yaakov Avinu. The face that adorns one of the sides of the Kiseh HaKavod of God's holy throne. He saw in the face of a sinner, he saw the face of a saint. But how was Yosef able to pull this up? How did he do it? One of the most beautiful ideas I ever heard goes that if you turn back, you want to know how Yosef was strong enough? You want to know how Yosef survived? How he became a king and still didn't give up his Judaism, and he raised children that we bless our kids to be like? Yisimecha Elohim ke'Ephraim ke'Menashe. How did he do it? Go back. Look again. Yaakov is sitting Shiva for Yosef. The brothers get up, and the pasuk says two words that are so powerful. Vayima'en lehinachem. And Yaakov refuses. He refuses to be consoled. I don't give up. I know the evidence is to the contrary. You're showing me the blood. Exhibit A, Exhibit B. My son is gone. I do not accept it. I'm waiting right here. And if it means that I wait and my soul goes down, biyagon she'ola, it goes down in sadness to hell itself, I will go down waiting for my son to come back, waiting by the window, sending the helicopters, dragging the searchlights, lending the talet, keeping the door open. That's Yom Kippur, a day of forgiveness, where God says, I don't care what you've done, where you've been, what's happened, my door's open for you. What a beautiful day. Now do you hear that God gives this day to us be'ahava, with love. Mi chamocha ava rachamim, now we say. Who is like you, O Master, Father of mercy, Zocher Yitzurav, who remembers his creations. Birachamim lechaim. You know how you know dad? God is a dad. You know how you know God's a dad? Zocher Yitzurav, he remembers his creations. Birachamim lechaim. Even if the only way he can remember them is by accessing his mercy. Even if the only way he can remember them is by having some sort of selective amnesia. Ignoring all the times where the guy doesn't want to go to shul and doesn't want to pray and doesn't keep Shabbat and doesn't do kosher and dates someone who's not Jewish and does all the terrible things that a person can do. Hashem doesn't remember any of that. Zocher Yitzurav Birachamim. He remembers with mercy only the bits. Only the bits. And who can do that but an Av, a father? You know why an Av is called an Av? Because it's the only two letters, per se, that are root letters. Obviously, there's other letters later in the alphabet. But that the Aleph and the Bet are a sequence. Aleph is 1, Bet is 2, 2 is a double 1. Do you understand that? The nature of an Av is to look at an Aleph and expect a Bet. And somehow, as dads, as parents, along the ages, we've lost the plot. And we stopped being people who see an Aleph and ask for a Bet. And we've become people who, when we see a Bet on a report card, a B, we ask for an A. The job of a parent is to nurture, is to lift up, is to give a child the possibility of hope, for another day. And Borei Olam, He doesn't want you to beat yourself up or kill yourself or go crazy or think that you're a terrible person. Borei Olam wants you to do one thing. To say to Him, I did this. I'm sorry. I'm going to be better. I know you've been waiting for me to be better. I'm going to be better. Rabbi Yisrael used to say, a person gets teshuvah not when you hit your heart, but when your heart hits you. When your heart says to you, Borei Olam, for God's sake, we are better than this. We can do more than this. We can push ourselves just a little bit harder, can't we? Not by feeling stupid, not by feeling small, but by recognizing our inherent greatness, where we could look into our own faces, the face of a sinner, and see the possibility of the face of a saint. I could look at myself in the throes of passion and Averah and see that I am a son of Yisrael. For in the end, what does the terminology Yisrael mean? Yisrael was a name that was given to Yaakov when he fights the angel. And what happens? And he wins. And what does he get called? He gets called Yisrael. Why? Ki sarita im Elokim v'adam v'tuchal. Because you fought with angels and with men, v'tuchal, and you have overcome. I always love to look at this. Go back to those Pesukim. You tell me if Yaakov won. He's fighting with the angel all night. Actually, the Yaakov doesn't damage the angel anymore. And they're fighting. It's a no contest, right? It's 0-0. They're still fighting in the morning. The angel says, I want to go. Does that sound like a person who's lost a fight? That sounds like it's deadlocked. And if anything happens, all of you will know in a fight, if no one TKOs or KOs the other guy, how do you decide? We look at who got in more hits. Who got in more hits? Yaakov or the angel? The angel, Latiga, the Kaf Yerech Yaakov, he hits the hip of Yaakov and Yaakov is limping. He limps off the field. And yet HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, you know what? You're called Yisrael. Why? Because you fought with angels and with men Batuchal and you overcame. Really? Yaakov overcame? Sounds like the angel won. The answer, my friends, is that in Judaism, it's not winning that is winning. It's trying that is winning. And you know how you know Yaakov won? Because he got hit. And because he didn't nail the angel. And because after all of that, he didn't leave. He was still in the fight in the morning. Still fighting. Still losing. But still fighting. Let's go into Yom Kippur. Still fighting. I want more. I want more from myself. I'm capable of more. I look in my face. A sinner, I see a saint. I could see Yaakov Avinu. I'm better than this. And suddenly, Vayanos, Vayetze achutza. Yosef feels this bubbling up inside of him. And he runs and he escapes. And he gets outside. This, my friends, is what happens when a child feels, Vayima'en lehinachem. The father refuses to give up. Have you met a dad that is better than the dad that we have in heaven? Who every year hears the same promises from us. And every year, beating like this. And every year, almost always even the same sins that we were beating on for last year. And yet Borei Olam says again, Rohi, you're going to shul. Don't forget. Here's my talet. Here are your lines. I'll see you on the other side. May God bless us to access the love of these days. To truly and honestly say to Hashem, I'm better than this. And let me show you. Give me what I need to be able to show you that I'm better than this. I promise I won't let you down. And each and every year, Borei Olam waits for us in shul. So this year, when you walk into shul, close your eyes. And before Yom Kippur starts, lift your eyes to the ceiling, to the heavens, and say, thank you, Borei Olam, for this glorious, amazing, and beautiful day. Tisku l'shanim rabot.